Well, you guys know me. This is Kris, one of the co-owners of 5098 Bread in Las Vegas. And we're gonna make some pastries together. Kris, what do you do for 5098? Do you make croissants every day?
I don't make pastries, so John's gonna teach me today. No, I do the business side of things. I do the focaccia and I do our cookie, our brown butter dark chocolate sourdough cookie. So Ryan is the bread magician.
So prior to your visit here, Ryan was doing, was he even, you guys weren't doing cookies before? Or?
Cookies we've been doing, focaccia we've been doing. We haven't done any sort of laminated pastry though, so.
Well, so I rolled this out, and the first thing that I did was stretched it out the opposite way of the way that it was stretched on the table. So on the sheeter, it's being stretched this way. And so all I did first was release the tension all the way down the line. And that way, when we actually go to cut our croissants, they're not going to shrink into something undesirable.
Makes
sense. I will show you this one, and then hopefully on the next one you can do some of this stuff.
Okay.
If you open up the bicicleta all the way, the width is 5 inches, which is the base of our plain croissants. You can take it down the line here and just trace the lines. And so now I have a bunch of 5-inch spaces. I'm gonna get this line a little better. I'm gonna clean up the edges. I just trim off the bare minimum here, mainly for a nice clean line. Probably would make very little difference, but I'm sure you feel the perfectionism of
Yes.
bakery life. In fact, we've had a couple conversations about that. Over time, like how hard it is to deal with mistakes and the consequences of that.
Yep. But also one of the things I've learned from you is that, especially with bread, sometimes you're really looking for like the perfect exterior look, but really when you get into it, like it can be just as delicious and nutritious, even if it didn't turn out to be the perfect loaf, which is very challenging when you're trying to like market through Instagram and measures that way.
For sure. I'm gonna get a straight edge really quick.
So in Las Vegas, currently we do a couple farmers markets a week, and we have wanted to expand. We thought on the way when we got here it was going to be a brick and mortar as soon as we got back. But what's happened from being here and learning from John and Amanda is we realized their 5 years in their garage were invaluable for their growth and just learning. So I think instead our whole business model has shifted to investing more in the home bakery, continuing to do that for the next couple of years. So we bought another oven, we bought another fridge, and now when we go back to Vegas, we're actually gonna have like 10 different touch points between markets and delivery pickup instead of 3 a week. So that's our new business plan. So that's been just invaluable to learn from these guys what they've experienced over their 5 years in the garage bakery before they open up this brick and mortar. So
I'm so pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
When you first arrived and you had mentioned that you guys were going to essentially go from here into it to launching a brick and mortar in Vegas, while I was incredibly excited for you, I was also very terrified for you at the same time.
Yeah.
Because if you do it, it really is like a fast forwarding effect, and you can't get into the details along the way like you guys want to. And it's increasingly hard for me to spend time rolling out pastry when there's a lot of people working for us that we need to take care of their careers.
Right.
And I have this responsibility to the team now where if I'm not doing the administrative stuff, who is? So back to croissants really quickly. I am going down the line and cutting from the top left edge to the bottom right edge on each of these 5-inch lines. So I have 5-inch gaps, and I'm going from the edge of the left line to the edge of the right line. And it's really important to go left to right, top to bottom. And I'll show you why here at the end. Suppose I reverse the flow and go in the opposite direction to start. When I go to cut my croissants, what's going to happen is This one wasn't so bad, but what ends up happening is they end up all rolling up. So there's nothing to protect. There's nothing to protect the croissant from rolling up, and it's really annoying. You end up losing time. Whereas when you go the other way, when I go to cut the croissants out, I'm actually holding down the pastry that I'm cutting as I'm rolling up. So it's just like a pro trick where when we were doing this back in the garage, we did it every which way for a little while, and we're wondering why some people's pastries rolled up and were annoying and other people's weren't. And it hit us that if we always start from the same direction, then this will happen. The one caveat to that is if you're left-handed, then you would do the other way. So I'm basically now going through and cutting out all the triangles by matching up the other lines that I didn't match up the first time. And as you see, like as I cut this one, I'm holding down the pastry with my straight edge. So once I'm down the whole line, we'll be ready to do the fun part. But yeah, the whole process of starting something like a bakery, I think the key learning activity that I've had over the last 5 years is that it takes time, and if you're doing a good job, it's already too fast. Like the 5 years to this point were a whirlwind and too fast for us. So I just could not put myself in your guys' shoes just trying to do this from where you are today and then graduating straight to something more akin to this. I think it would be a big risk. Is that kind of where you guys have come to think of it as well, or?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the most important thing you told me was like do everything you can without additional overhead before you get into having like the big boy bills of obviously like what it costs to have something like this. So for us it's that, and also just the research and development side of things, like being able to have fun with baking and practice and test out ingredients and come up with new things. Once you're overcommitted, that's very difficult. And so that's something we want to actually include in our process is like 2 days a month of kind of like R&D days of being able to like test out new things and just have fun, because that's something that baking should be.
So now the roll-up process where you're gonna help me, I teach everybody to just go straight into two-handed, because what's the point? If you don't actually practice both hands, you're never going to get it. So use all the triangles with the bases facing you first, and simply fold over the two nearest bases and have them started like this.
Okay.
So then you can put your hands down on each one, and once you get it going, you should be able to roll up each one to the end. It's a little easier going forward, so go all the way down the line and do all the forward ones, and then I will, meanwhile, go down the line and do all the ones that are backwards.
I love the feel of croissant dough.
I think there's nothing really more satisfying than this exact process right here.
Yeah.
There's nothing quite like it. Specifically plain croissants and rolling them up.
And am I trying to pinch the little tip down?
So the key on the tip is to not overstretch it. If you overstretch it, what you'll end up doing in the final pastry is, like, if I was to pull this really tight, it will hold that tightness all the way through the bake, and you'll have like a weird valley in your pastry. But you do want to try to get it down at the bottom, like so. And you're looking for this, well, in our case, you're looking for this amount of layering. So you have the tip plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tip. So it's like really 1, 2, 3, 4 layers deep. And you're doing great.
Perfect, thank you.
The whole process of starting a bakery simply takes time. It's easy to look at other bakeries that are making it kind of all seem too easy and forget that they themselves probably went through an extraordinary amount of time to get to where they are. It's hard to, I think you can fast forward it, but I think if you fast forward it, there's compromises that come along the way.
Right.
for instance, Ryan was saying how much he wants to actually be, baking the bread that you guys make.
Yes.
And I don't know, what have you guys observed here that would make it challenging in that regard?
Well, I think what seems to be like the larger you grow, the less hands you have on the dough, and the more people under you. I mean, that's the part that they're learning and doing.
Yeah.
So I think, we've always felt that way. He actually always wanted to be kind of like a one-man bakery, and that's why I was so excited to come here and have him have the experience of baking with the team. I come from a retail leadership background where I've worked with a lot of people at once and teams, and so. It kind of made me sad thinking of him like never baking with other bakers. So being able to be here and work with your team and you guys has been just super fun to see, from a partner standpoint, to see him have that experience. Because like today when the line is full and everyone's just shaping dough together, I mean, it's such a blast.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like that.
No, it's so fun.
That in and of itself makes somebody maybe want to fast forward and have that environment. But that environment comes at a lot of cost.
Yes.
So.
And I think you could have that with a couple people. Like it could be a smaller version of that as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
We've had that kind of camaraderie around the table for a long time now. I mean, really from the beginnings. I think it's nice to not be completely alone. There's something quite isolating about. There's plenty of bakers I know that talk about being like essentially trapped in caves for years, isolated from everybody.
Right.
And kind of thinking about the origins of Proof, where Jared was working alone for a number of years, really like 3 or 4 years on Proof before anybody else joined, and that was he couldn't quite retain anybody under his tenure, and then we really struggled at first because we could only afford to pay pretty meager wages at the beginning.
Right.
So, at the beginning, our employees all had different jobs. Proof was their second or third priority. That was a challenge in and of itself. And now, we're trying to learn from 5 years of making mistakes and hiring in the way that we were employers, because if you are focused on the business and focused on the dough, then you might not be focused on career development of your employees.
Right. I mean, baking is a bit of a hustle, especially when you start off as a cottage bakery. It's definitely a hustle. So I think it's kind of hard. You just are like all hands on deck. Let's go, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to think of the growth.
Well, it's always been like that. It's
Yeah.
like been people working more than they ought to, and just a cycle of burning folks out until really we finally said we can't keep cycling the same bad cycle over and over again, which is actually right when you guys came. We found ourselves in a position in December where our team members from the last couple years in the garage and transitioning here that had been with us through the whole pandemic, a lot of them were just burnt out and over it. And it's hard to blame them. Months of endless days. One team member in particular, I remember her like being at the oven in our garage during the summer months in 2020, like all day when it's 100 and who knows how many degrees,
wow.
right? At least we have like an air conditioner right above our oven here. Not the case in the garage. It's literally a hot room.
Right, yeah. Made even hotter by a giant oven. How many do you like to put per tray for proofing?
So I like to go 12. Wait, were you doing 12 or 15 these days? 12, yeah. We've changed it over time, and every time I do it, I question whether it's an old version or a new one. I can't keep them straight. It's just like that.
Perfect.
So the backstory of us and Kris and Ryan, we were taking our 1 week winter break and kind of in some difficult straits. Like we were looking at a situation where it was Amanda, myself, and Logan able to continue, and then a couple people that had just started with us. And we're just looking at our situation saying, wow, we're not really, we could have a situation where we're not able to actually do anything business-wise for months. And these guys reached out and offered to come out for a few months and help us bridge our labor gap. I'm pleased to say it's worked tremendously. Like, they came and Ryan had all the experience that he had, so it was easier to get him up and running. Within a couple weeks, he was functioning like an experienced proof team member. And meanwhile, we've just been working so diligently on hiring.
Yeah, it's been incredible. How many people you've hired just in the 2 months that we've been here?
Well, we had a really terrible go at hiring the few months before you guys got here. This was more of what we had in mind, and we just weren't getting anyone in. And it was mostly a factor of time. I was in here, Amanda was in here,
Right.
Cecily was actually taking care of Lacey's maternity leave next door, and so it's like we just could not do all of the marketing that it takes to actually bring people in these days.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you guys how much gratitude we have for you guys doing this. It's a pretty uncommon thing. Like, oh, we're just going to drop everything and come to a new city and, hope for the best. We don't have a place to stay, but it'll work out.
It all works out. And for us, we had always been talking about this, about Ryan specifically traveling somewhere to go bake with people. And we were in New Orleans on our 1 week break of the year. I think bakers take like the first week of January off because everyone's on a diet. And it's a little slow. And so we were in New Orleans, like sitting in our hotel bed, saw the post, and we were actually out there to visit Bellegarde, who's like a fantastic stone miller and baker. And I said, oh my gosh, look, Proof posted this. And Ryan will probably tell the story in a bit about him finding you and learning so much from the YouTube channel, but it was just serendipity. So it was so great for us to be able to come out. And
So I'm making a couple rosemary twists from the edges. The key is to make the middle piece on top. It doesn't really matter the orientation of the others. And then it's just a simple braid into the middle. So my guess is you're better at braiding than I am.
This is my favorite pastry that you make here. I've never had a savory croissant. And the rosemary and the salt is so good.
I think a lot of people are in that boat and then they try it, and you're definitely not alone. There's an entire group of people that want a rosemary twist more than anything else.
Yep.
We're kind of in a transition here on the line. You can see what's going on back there, cleaning up the dough divider, cleaning up the table, and our entire team is now getting ready to roll out a lot more than we just did in terms of pastry. I don't know exactly the count today, but I think it's something like 30 times what we just did. So we will take another sheet as soon as it arrives. Kelsey, I'm ready for another whenever you are. This past couple months has just flown by.
Yeah.
You guys haven't even made it over to the garage yet. That's like how busy we all are. But before you leave, we have a date.
Yep.
So it'll be a lot of fun to see, because it's like, a step back from here, but in the garage you can still very clearly see all the steps that we made to get to that step. So aside from the fact that we have removed the air conditioning units from the wall that were making walk-ins, we decided to recover the exterior wall of our house as opposed to having 2 air conditioning units sticking out of it that no longer were necessary. But we have we have 2 weird heavily insulated rooms right now that are like tool sheds. I don't know why they're so well insulated for tools, but I promise you those tools are going to be climate controlled pretty well.
I bet.
So I'm excited to have you guys over there. We're doing a little one of the things we have not had time to do for years, really since, our world's been in a craze since COVID. And I don't think we've really had many team get-togethers since COVID started. We used to actually make it a point to do team building activities and get together, and then we sort of looked back and wondered why we were struggling in building teams. So this will be our first time with Main Street Harvest crew even coming over to see the garage, and out of this entire group of people, only Logan and Cecily next door have actually been inside of our garage, which is
That's crazy.
So strange.
Yeah.
So strange. especially given like none of this would be here. I feel so intimately tied to those 5 years that I feel the connection between the two facilities. But everybody who's starting now is just starting from here, fresh. So
yeah, they probably won't be able to imagine like that it ever existed in a garage.
On that note, what did you imagine? I mean, the perception coming here, I'm sure ended up being different, like in reality, than what you might have thought.
Yeah, I feel like I think the oven was the biggest thing that was like in my brain, seeing an oven this big. We bake in a Rofco B40, which has 3 stone decks. It's about the size of a dishwasher, and it makes 12 loaves of bread at one time. So knowing that this makes 124 loaves, I think this was like the biggest thing that was just like burned into my brain from your Instagrams and videos. And so just seeing it was like standing beside like the peel that's 50 feet tall, and all of that is just like mind-boggling. But it's crazy how quickly it becomes really normal. Like now it's normal to walk in here and be like, oh, this is the production, this is how big it is. And so it's gonna be really fun to go back to like our home and be baking. Now we have 2 ovens, so 24 loaves at a time, which feels huge to us.
Got it.
Won't feel so huge anymore. So it'll be, I think, really fun to, especially for like I was talking about earlier, the testing and the R&D. It feels more manageable now to do like 24 loaves at once and have space to actually do some other things. So I'm excited to get back into our house and just see how that shift in pace and everything. I mean, Ryan's always been a fast shaper, but just like the scale of it, now we're used to this.
That was a weird phenomenon for me too. I remember feeling like it was a drag in the summer of 2017 to get through 40 loaves myself.
Yeah.
And I find that to be a complete joke now, to get through 40 loaves. But it was a drag. And like the whole 5 years, really like a story of figuring out how to do more in the same amount of time and mentally like wrap your mind around it. It's definitely also a struggle for employees. So another reason why, taking your time now so that you can actually give people the tools they need to deal with that, because I think that was one of the things that happened to some of our employees here was they were used to what we were doing even last summer in the garage. And then all of a sudden, like, you got to do it twice or 3 times the amount here by the time we hit fall. And it's sort of just like a mental trickery to do it. Kris, what are some of the biggest takeaways from your guys' time here?
I think the biggest takeaway is, well, one, continued just sense of community in the baking community, which we know in Las Vegas, the baking community is actually quite small. Sourdough bread, I will say, baking community. And so coming here and just like meeting so many people, it just continues to inspire us to carry on down this path. We're really community-based people. That's why we started doing something in food. We really had no background in food other than just being enthusiasts. So being able to be part of the food world has been a dream for me specifically. And Ryan being naturally so good at baking was just like an unbelievable thing. So the community is a big takeaway, and continuing to try to drive that when we get back to Vegas. As I mentioned, with us doing the new pickups, we specifically chose 5 different locations that are also craftsmen. So like an artisan cheese shop, a craft butcher, a great brewery, a coffee shop, and then also a really great wine and spirit store. Because I feel like that also is part of like the food community and just that local craft business. So for us, that's a big takeaway. The business, slowing it down, not worrying about the growth quite as drastically leaping up, and just doing it organically so we can continue to improve our skills. Sourcing better ingredients has been a huge thing too. Being able to meet Hayden Flour Mills, which is down here just 30 minutes away. We went and visited. Claire there showed us around and got to meet the mill and the farmer, the miller, the head miller, the farmer, and just actually see the wheat being grown in like the next field over, being cleaned and then being milled within 100 feet is remarkable. So we're gonna try to bring some of that with us to Vegas. So it's just been a really eye-opening time. It's also given us 2 months to pause and talk about all this stuff. It's really hard when you're like in the middle of all your momentum to have a minute to like slow down and actually think about these things and put them into action. So it's been really cool just having the time for, Ryan's been doing a lot of the baking here, and I've had a lot of time to work on the business plan while we're here. So
I think that's a really good
exciting
one, that particular one about like needing a pause to get stuff done. The weeks that we take off, which are very seldom, like we'll typically try to take 1 to 2 weeks off in the summer months, which last year we did not do. And we try to take 1 week off in between Christmas and New Year's. And we make some of our most important decisions in that pause, always. And then like we get back to it, it seems impossible to make those kind of decisions. I don't know why, but it's exactly what you're just saying.
Yeah, there's just so much. And being a small business owner, I mean, it's super exciting and it's also super overwhelming. You know, you're paying your mortgage or paying for your food with the results of things. So there is that pressure to build something you're really proud of and at the same time be able to manage that, you know? So
you have been, while here, you've been doing a lot of work. You did some work at the markets. You've done some work in front of house. You mentioned that like in Vegas, the bread community is small. What are some things that you've noticed about our community, I guess?
Well, the market community in particular here is incredible. I mean, you guys participate in 5 markets, and they're all very large. I would say probably the smallest one is as big as our largest one in Vegas. Obviously, in Vegas, it's a desert. We don't have a ton of farming happening there. Our market managers are farmers that bring in from either Kingman, Arizona, or California. But there's a ton of amazing vendors. It's just very spread out in Las Vegas, so people kind of stay in their zones. So being here and going to like Uptown Farmers Market where there's thousands of people that attend the market on Saturdays is just so cool to see the potential.
And you've worked the Saturday market at Uptown at this point, right?
I haven't worked it, but I went and visited when Ryan was working it. I worked the Wednesday markets, which are probably similar in scale to our biggest ones, but the Saturday market is like Disneyland. I mean, it's truly unbelievable.
Yeah, it's kind of insane. And it's the thing that I will add though is that regardless of where you guys are at with markets right now in Vegas, I think if you had visited Phoenix 10 years ago, you would have found it to be very similar. Most of the farmers markets that we attend are less than 10 years old. I think with the exception of maybe one. And even that one is less than 20 years old. So if you had come here to this giant city a couple decades ago, I think you would see a situation that does not involve so many strong markets. But what I love about what's happened in this valley is that it lets people start things in food, and the markets are definitely the strongest entry point for anybody who's trying to build a local food economy.
Yeah, and I think in Vegas, that's what's really exciting. We moved there only a year ago. My parents have been there for 20 years, but it's obviously, you think of Vegas, you think of these massive famous restaurants on the Strip, and there's this just booming local food scene, especially downtown in the Arts District, that's all those people that work in food and bev on the Strip, you know, they've started their own things, and it's very much about this local movement, and so we're super excited to be part of that. But I agree, I think that it's just going to continue to grow the market scene there as more people start businesses like ours.
So a long time ago, it's probably been 2 years, but we did an episode on the sourdough podcast.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And on that episode, I mentioned that I wanted to do a baker's exchange. And now we're actually seeing this happen in real life. Like, you guys have come out here and done an exchange. Maybe one day we'll send some bakers your way to learn from you.
Yes.
But do you think more people in baking ought to see what others are doing and experience it?
Absolutely. I think the sourdough bread community on Instagram is huge. You know, whether you're like first day baking or have been doing it for a long time, it's such a strong community. And that's one way to look at it. But then actually like having hands-on in another bakery and actually spending time, it just builds that. I mean, there's conventions and whatnot, but spending time in someone's bakery and seeing how they do things is just, you know, immeasurable in terms of value. Just hanging out with bakers is fun.
For sure. One of my favorite experiences of all time, I talk about it a lot on video actually, is my time going up to grain gathering, because it was like such a warm family of people that saw the world through a similar set of lenses and had a similar set of experiences. Whereas, we serve our customers, and it is a very different relationship that we have with making bread than the people consuming bread have. Although our goal has always been to try to get the public to kind of understand what it's like to make this kind of bread. So my pitch on the Baker's Exchange, what's wrong with the idea of me taking one of my bakers that's willing to travel and sending them over to another bakery, and them sending me one of their bakers that's willing to travel? We just keep both each paying our normal wages to our normal bakers, and it could work for the amount of time that both parties were willing to travel and do this. I think we ought to do more of that, and I invite more people to reach out and see if we can arrange stuff like that.
Yeah.
Amanda and I want to get out into the world a little bit and visit other bakeries ourselves. My friend from Ukraine did that years into starting her bakery. In 2018, she spent the summer in the US, was when we met. And I agree, there's so much to learn from everybody. When you're in your own world, it's not always clear. Like there's probably tricks and techniques that I still don't know that people do on a daily basis with the same products we make, but we've never seen them, so we wouldn't even think to try.
Yeah, we've always felt that way. When we picked up our first Rofco, it was in Napa, and we planned our entire road trip around every single baker on Instagram that we were kind of chatting with at the time, stopping in and meeting them. And we actually went to Mike's house, who is a sourdough podcast, and went to his home.
Yeah.
And showed us how to use this equipment, and just chatted about bread and the grain economy, and did the same thing up at Josie Baker in San Francisco. And we'll do the same thing when we travel to Portland to pick up our next Rofco when we leave here. And it's just, people are so welcoming and let you into their home and their business. And
didn't you guys end up seeing a Rofco with Hartquist Hollow or something like that?
Yes, they did have one. They still are using it, or they haven't used it, but they still have it. So we ended up getting one from Josh Fairbanks up in Portland. So that's who we're going to go up and pick. He's great. We chatted immediately, just connected on Instagram. Somebody else, we put on Instagram, we were looking for a Rofco oven, and within one day, the bread community reposted it, and somebody heard about it and messaged us in one day.
I think the bread community has shifted dramatically from what at least people that have been baking bread for many years have said. A lot of people have said, oh, well, there's this dynamic of people not wanting to share recipes and being all secretive, but that hasn't been my experience at all. I think it's important to state that, because people out there that are wondering if others will be willing to help them, you could be surprised just reaching out to somebody on social media. They might really open up. You guys reached out randomly to us, absolutely come. We need the help.
Right, and it changed our whole business dynamic. So yeah, no, I would 100% recommend that to anybody, whether you're starting out or not. It's just, the more reach you have around the country, around the world, there's just more resources for you and just more help whenever you need it. I mean, we're on your Baker's Exchange WhatsApp, which is super incredible. Everyone just posts questions all day long, things they have, recipes, photos, anything, equipment-wise, bread-wise, and it's endless information.
Yeah, for sure. So much so that you got to wonder if you have time to read it all.
Yeah.
But,
you got to pick and choose.
Where can our YouTube audience find you?
So we are in Las Vegas on Instagram, which is where we're most active, is 5098 Bread. So just 5098 Bread. And also on Facebook, our website's 5098bread.com. But yeah, please reach out. We've actually already had people that have sent us messages that are your proof, fans and viewers that are excited that we're here. And so we would love to chat with anybody. If anyone's coming through Vegas, a lot of people come to Vegas, reach out. We would love to, chat about bread or share a loaf with you guys.
So if you guys are looking for a good loaf of bread in Las Vegas, don't spend your trip eating just the strip store-bought bread. These guys are there and are happy to bake for you. I know when I go anywhere, that's my first mission is, can I actually get some good bread for the time that I'm out? So Vegas does not have to be a sourdough desert to you all.
Yes.
I'm really thankful that you guys came here and did all this, and it's going to be sad to see you guys go.
I know, yeah. This is now going to be forever part of our fabric of our business story, or life story, really, which our business is now our life. So it's been just invaluable, and we appreciate you guys like hosting us so much. So John and Amanda are incredible. I'm currently staying at Amanda's.
Flagstaff I think is equidistant, so maybe you should visit this summer if you guys can't make it all the way down here.
Absolutely.
So,
cool.
Well, that's that on the pastries. Hopefully now you're ready to make croissants
I'm ready
in Vegas.
to go and twists. Yeah.